I'm going to delete this viewport 3D, and I'm going to add a new element to my project. You'll notice this time when I'm adding elements to my project, I'm using the Project menu, where previously I was right-clicking the project in the Files Inspector. Functionally, there really is no difference between the two. I'm going to add existing, and this time I'm going to add the cone and cube file. Now I hit Open, and you'll see that cone and cube is a XAML document, similar to Window 1. By default, I'm still looking at Window 1, so I need to double-click on cone and cube to see it. Now we can see the cone and cube viewport. If you look over in the object tree, I don't have a viewport 3D, but a XAM3D viewport 3D. This is because this particular model was created by Electric Rain's XAM3D product. Blend has the ability to use 3D models exported from many different 3D modeling tools. I'm just using XAM3D right now because it's the one I happen to have access to. I want to move the cone and cube into my main document. You can consider a viewport a layout manager for 3D objects. The cone and the cube are separate models within that viewport. If I expand the Model Visual 3D, you'll see that there's a Content node, a Scene node, and eventually the lights and the particular models. I want to take the entire viewport though, so I'm going to select the viewport, go to Edit and copy my viewport, and now switch back to Window 1.xaml. Now I can paste my viewport, and I've brought these models now into my main document. Now looking at the models, I can see the cone perfectly, but my cube is way off to the side where I can't do anything with it. Similar to the way I was working with the Camera Orbit tool with the images, it works the same here. So I'm going to first move back a little bit by holding down the Alt key, clicking and dragging downward. I'm going to change my perspective a little bit by releasing my modifier keys and dragging, and then use the Control key to move everything into view. From this perspective, I can't get all my elements to fit, so I just need to move my camera back a little bit further. Now I've got my cone and cube on screen, I can work with them. The cone and cube, as I expand the tree, just like I saw before on the cone and cube XAML, I still have my model visual, I still have my content, I still have my scene. And just like I did with the images, I can select the cone and use the selection tool to modify it. Now these properties are animatable properties just like we did before when we were doing animations. So I'm going to create a new timeline here. I'm just going to leave the default name. And at time 0, I'm going to set a keyframe. And at time 2, I'm going to flip my cone over. Now in the timeline, just like we saw before, 2 keyframes have been established, one at time 0, one at time 2 for the cone's position. Now when I press play, the animation runs and my cone flips over. This time I'm going to expand my camera node, and I'm going to select my camera and create a keyframe for it. Now at time 0, I'm going to use my Camera Orbit tool to change the position of the camera. Now it's going to look like the cone and the cube loop in when I press play, and the cone is still going to flip over as it moves. The camera, the elements in the scene, as well as the lights can all be animated independently. Let's add one more animation. I'm going to set to 0, and I'm going to select the directional light. I'm going to go over to my Properties Inspector, and the properties for the light are fairly simple. I'm going to expand the light category, and you can see the different types of light, the ambient lights, the point lights, the directional lights, and the spotlights. At time 0, I've got a white light shining on my elements. I'm going to change that to red. You can see that as I change it, my artboard changes accordingly. Now if I move my playhead to 2 seconds, I can change the color, and this time perhaps to blue. Just like we were doing before, we now have an interpolated color animation, so when I press play, the objects move, the triangle flips over, and the color on the triangle, as well as the cube, both move smoothly from red to blue.